Hey, Billiken fans, it's Zach Miller, Peter Hale, and this is the Midtown Madness podcast. We're excited to be joined by a man whose name is almost synonymous with early 90s Billiken basketball and whose voice has become a staple of television broadcasts on Bally Sports Midwest. Scott Highmark joining the podcast. Scott, great to have you on, man.
Fellas, it's a pleasure to be here. I've listened to your many of your episodes, and I've had lots of friends be guests. So I'm honored that you would ask me to be on tonight.
That's amazing. That's always great to hear that alumni enjoy the show. Scott, we just got word that SLU is releasing replica jerseys for sale. Hypothetically, if NIL and replica jerseys were sold when you played with players' names on them, whose jersey on that 94-95 team would have been the top seller?
It's a great question. You're starting out hot, huh?
Coming in hot.
Man, I tell you what, I'll say it this way. Clag was the best player for sure. That was but and I would have worked the business angle really hard. I would have figured out the NIL and how to monetize that. I think better than most. But H was the coolest cat in on the team, so H probably would have won the day if I had to put a name on it.
Pete, who are you? Whose jersey are you getting from that team? I know mine, and I think you know mine. But who you got?
Yeah, I know yours, which he will reveal shortly. I don't know. I might have gone with Plagues. I mean, I hate to admit it. Although I honestly we did meet back when I was 10 years old in 1993. There was a regional in St. Louis at the time. I don't think you guys were in the tournament yet that year.
Yeah.
But my mom pulled us out of school because it was like my 10th birthday, and we went to the shoot around. And I was like, Mom, there's Scott Highmark. Should we go say hi? And she pulls out a diaper from like my sister's diaper from the diaper bag and asked you to autograph the diaper,
Oh my.
which you complied with. And I'm guessing you probably don't remember that, but my mom insisted that I ask about that and see if you remembered. after,
Man,
after that, I probably would have gotten your jersey just for being such a gracious person.
I don't remember that, but I'm gonna tell my kids that story. They won't believe it. I don't remember that, but that's hilarious.
I don't know if we still have it. She
I
probably
hope
she probably
not.
had to use it later that day or something.
Yeah, exactly. I hope not.
Pete, I'm gonna have to let you do the rest of this interview because I'm lost. I'm at a loss for words right now. No, mine would be Jeff Harris, and Jeff Harris is my all-time favorite when I was that age, and even there's a picture of him. I got. I'm sure this is evidence of improper benefits, but there's a trophy that I gave him. I'm sure it's been purged by now, but I think he admitted as such. But just like my favorite player, and I ended up meeting him before the game and have a picture. But no,
Hey,
Jeff Harris.
that's a great answer. Jeff would have been next on my list. He was a couple years younger than us, but you can't go wrong with Jeff. Jeff was like the mayor. I mean, he was like everybody's hero and fit right in, and still to this day he's like the connector of a lot of the guys that in our era. Jeff's like the great connector. So
It,
super huge fan of Jeff Harris.
he's also my favorite interview that I've done. I just if anybody wants to go back on the House That Rick Built podcast, it's like 3 hours long, and it is some of the funniest stories I've ever heard regarding Billiken basketball. It really
Yeah.
is. But we're here to talk about you, Scott. You were born March 9th, 1973, St. Louis, Missouri. Was it always about basketball for you, or did you play other sports growing up?
You know what? I played a lot of sports because I moved like 12 times before I was 13. So my dad worked for what used to be Ralston Purina, and so we moved about every year. It was almost military style. And the good news is he'd get a promotion, and they'd say, okay, now you got to move from the Vandalia, Illinois, and then we moved to Effingham, Illinois. Then we moved from Atlanta to Atlanta, and then we moved to Minneapolis, and we moved to Memphis. I mean, we just kind of kept moving around. So I played a little bit of hockey when we lived in Minneapolis. I played a little soccer, played baseball from the get. And then really wasn't until we moved to Memphis when I was in like sixth grade when basketball in Memphis, as you know, is it, right? It's everything. And at least it was when I was there. And so kind of got the basketball fever in Memphis and got involved in AAU circuit down there. And then we moved to St. Louis, but I played baseball up until my sophomore year of high school. And I remember after my sophomore year in high school, I went to my coach and said, hey, I was kind of tired of dragging fly balls like on a sunny spring day. And I knew that in order for me to play at this level that I wanted to play at, I was going to have to really work hard. And I just knew like shagging fly balls in the outfield wasn't going to get it done. And I wasn't talented enough to do that. And my high school coach told me, he goes, this is the biggest mistake you'll ever make in your life, quitting baseball. And I remember going, wow, that's kind of an interesting thing to tell a 15-year-old. He might not have been wrong. I might have been better in baseball because I was a 6'5" righty that could throw hard, but I just didn't love the game like I loved hoop. So anyway, it was always basketball, baseball, basketball at the end became my deal.
Moving around, is that how you got that voice for broadcasting? That kind of that no accent voice.
Oh, I had an accent when we lived in Memphis for sure. And then when I moved here, you know what? I don't know. I don't feel like I have a voice for broadcasting. Definitely don't have a face for it. I just stumbled into it. Like Dan McLaughlin is responsible, to be honest with you. Dan's responsible for getting me in it. And 20 some odd years later, we're still doing some games together, which is super fun.
I am actually curious about that. Like, how does that first come up? That wasn't something you were interested in after school or anything like that. It seems like it just kind of, I guess just your relationship with Dan. He was like, I need a color commentary guy. It was
No,
that simple.
totally. You'll like this story. Totally organic, if you will. Like, so KFNS at the time was doing a high school game of the week on the radio. The year 90, I guess I played basketball kind of, I was a basketball vagabond my first year out of school, played in Australia and played for Athletes in Action, and then came back. And then when I got back, started working at AG Edwards. KFNS was doing a high school Friday night game of the week on the radio. And they're like, hey, do you want to be the color analyst? Dave Green was the guy at the time doing play-by-play. And he just called me, and I guess he had heard me, doing interviews at SLU or whatever. And I'm like, sure, I got nothing else to do on Friday night. I love high school hoops. Let's go do it. So I did some games that year. And then I was at the Missouri Valley Conference tournament the March of the following year, March of 96. And I was doing the radio for that just because, again, it just kind of kept spiraling. They kept asking me to do stuff. And I run into Dan, who I didn't know very well. And he said, hey, you want to do the state championship game on TV with me on Fox? And I'm like, I've never done TV. I've only done a few high school games. And he's like, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And so he went and talked to his bosses. And next thing you know, I was doing the high school state championship. It was like Bashan and DeSmet, and I was scared to death. And he held my hand all the way through it. And we had a blast doing it. And then he goes, hey, you should do the Missouri Valley games with me, because he was doing Valley games at the time in the off season for baseball. And I was like, all right. And so then honestly, he's gotten every gig I've ever gotten. So he calls the Valley guys and says, hey, I got a color analyst. And honestly, I think he only did it because he wanted somebody to travel with from St. Louis. Like, like it was like he just needed a buddy to like road trip with. And so I happened to meet the guy. And so we started doing Valley games. We did that for a long time. And then the SLU thing, kind of just evolved organically. Some games became available, and they were like, well, why are you doing games for the Valley? And I did games for ESPN Regional. And they're like, why don't you do our games? I'm like, I'd love to if there's a spot. And then over time, got an opportunity to do more and more of that. So anyway, it's just a crazy how it worked out. Definitely not planned.
Dan McLaughlin just got to do a USA Network game. Did you get to catch him doing that?
A USA Network basketball game?
Yeah, it was the NBC
game?
No, it was the NBC broadcast on USA Network for the Billikens, which is wild to me.
Oh yeah, because he filled in. Yeah, there was like a last minute deal. He had a call like 5 hours before the game, and happened to be available and made it work. So Oh, Dan, I mean, Dan could, I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that Dan could do national games. Dan did ESPN, big ESPN. And I mean, Dan could do as much as he wanted at this point. He just, after doing 160 baseball games, I don't think he wants to do, 60 basketball games, but he makes it so easy. And he gets the game. Like I've done enough basketball with other play-by-play folks where they're like professional broadcasters, but they don't understand the rhythm and flow of the game and like the moments that happen. And one of the many things I appreciate about Dan is he actually gets the game, which makes it fun for me as a basketball guy, because I feel like he kind of understands the moments that matter.
So in terms of you doing the games now, is it just based on your availability? Like Troy did one, Troy Robinson did one a week or two ago. And I'm wondering, how does that work now? Do you guys kind of trade off? Does one guy get called first, or how does that work?
Yeah, yeah. No, Troy's a good friend, and so we've tried to work him in over the last couple of years to get some reps, if you will. I think he likes it and would like to do a little bit more. I mean, we're not doing that many games. I mean, back in the day, when Frank Cusinano and I were doing, charter, we were doing games on charter. We were doing 15, 20 games. We were traveling and the whole deal. And now, Fox or Bally Sports Network only gets maybe 10 games total. So there's not a whole lot to split up. But yeah, sometimes it just works where I can't do it, or there's, we're trying to get Troy some games to get some reps in, just to make sure we have some depth there. So anyway, and I think Troy's super witty and understands the game, and he and I work well together on trying to figure that out. But the Valley sports people have been super gracious to me and always kind of let me work, because I mean I have a day job and family and stuff, and just doesn't always work where I can make it work.
You mentioned that back in high school you decided it was going to be basketball from there on out, and thank God you did, because you end up taking Parkway West to their first and only state championship in 1991, scoring 30 points in the championship game. What was that like, winning a state championship?
Yeah, it was like really, I mean, very cliche to say, but it was very like storybook. Like you always dream about doing that, for your high school, your senior year. And uh, we had uh, we had in my junior year, we kind of had the same team, and we got upset in the district finals. And just to be able to make a run, and I kind of had a group of guys that we kind of grew up together. When I moved here in seventh grade, like that group, that core group just went through Parkway West. We just kind of had a special class, and we had guys that went on to play. We had a couple guys that played basketball, but a lot of guys played football, Division I football, Division I baseball. So we just had athletes, and we put some athletes around some basketball players. And I think, like you said, it was in overtime, so it could have gone either way. And Bashan was really good at the time. Parkway Central was in our conference, and they were on the other side. So if they had won their Final Four game, we would have played Parkway Central for the state championship. That would have been our fifth time to play them that year. So we were like putting voodoo dolls on Parkway Central to make sure we didn't have to play them again for like the fifth time that year. But it was really special. I mean, we still talk about it, and I mean, I'm very fortunate. A lot of things have to go your way, but you do 20-year reunions for state championships and NCAA appearances. You don't do 20-year reunions for runner-ups, and they just don't. They do it for championships. They don't hang banners for runner-ups, and to be able to win it all, it is pretty cool.
I'm wondering about AAU. And when did you kind of start playing AAU ball, and what programs, and was that affected at all by the fact that you moved around a lot, or did you not play until you were back in St. Louis?
No, I played in Memphis when I first started playing in 12 and under. And again, this is like just kind of how, I mean, I would say that the Lord has blessed me in so many ways. Like I just stumbled into this AAU program called the Bellevue War Eagles in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, it turns out the Bellevue War Eagles, they were pretty good, and we ended up winning the AAU national championship 12 and under. And and I was just a guy. I was tall and I could shoot a little bit, but I was like, I mean, I was like not, I don't even think I started on that team. I was just a guy. And in Memphis, honestly, like in Memphis, I was just very, very average. And then we moved to St. Louis, and all of a sudden it was like I was like the guy. Nothing changed other than I just moved towns, and the talent level was that different, but it actually gave me a lot more confidence, because in Memphis they would say, hey Scott, go stand in the corner, if you're open, shoot it, other than that, pass it to us. And when I moved here, I had to like handle the ball, and I had to do other things and try to get to the rim and make plays, and it actually helped me. So anyway, so I got a taste of AAU obviously in Memphis, then I moved here, and again, by just dumb luck or divine providence, Rich Gray, who you guys might know, who started the St. Louis Eagles program, who passed away a couple years ago, started the St. Louis Eagles and wanted to build like a national program. And we were like the second class, like Melvin Robinson's class was the one ahead of us, but we were really the first full-fledged St. Louis Eagles that went through the program. And we had guys like Claggett and myself and Julian Winfield, and we had to get him Eric Woods that played at Vanderbilt. Eric Bickle played at St. Louis U with us for a little bit. I mean, we had like 10 Division I players, and we went all the way through the system, and I got a great taste and had incredible coaching from Rich Gray, and the St. Louis Eagles had a great experience. We ended up beating Chris Webber's team in the semifinals of AAU Nationals one year in 17 and under. That was kind of the thing we talk about to this day. They had Jalen Rose and Chris Webber. I mean, Bashan Leonard, they were loaded. And somehow we beat them in the semifinals and ended up losing in the finals. But yeah, AAU was a big part of it. It was definitely a big part of my life.
Who were you recruited by coming out of high school? And kind of walk me through your decision making process in staying home and playing for SLU.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say kind of like my final five schools ended up being obviously SLU, Mizzou, Iowa State was very involved. Minnesota, when Clem Haskins was there, was very involved. Stanford recruited me pretty hard. Mike Montgomery was there. Baylor, Kim Anderson was at Baylor. So he was a Missouri guy. So he wasn't the head coach, but he was assistant. So he was recruiting me. They weren't very good at the time, but and then Charlie Spoonhour recruited me hard at Missouri State. So that was kind of the 6 or 7 schools that I got interested in. Long story, Stanford, it was funny. You guys appreciate this, is they were recruiting me. They needed a 2 guard, me and a guy named Fred Hoiberg. You guys know who Fred Hoiberg is?
Yeah.
So I played against Fred Hoiberg from every year AAU. We always guarded each other. And his nickname was the mayor, right? He was the mayor of Ames. Like since he was like 13, he was the mayor. And so Mike Montgomery calls me. I'm supposed to go on my visit to Stanford. I'd already applied to the school and done all this stuff. And he goes, hey, and I told him, hey, I want to sign early. I don't want to wait to the spring. And they say, we want you to come on our visit, but before you come on our visit, we want to just be wholly candid with you. You're our second 2 guard. Fred Hoiberger is our number 1. So if he wants to sign early, we're going to sign him early and we'll sign you late. And I'm like, well, that's not what we talked about. And they said, well, we think we got a really good shot and we think he's a pro. And I go, he's probably a pro. I literally said this 18-year-old. I go, but you know his nickname's the mayor, right? Like he grew up in Ames, Iowa. I said, I'm pretty sure he's going to go to Iowa State. And they're like, well, we think we got a shot at him. So long story short, I canceled my visit, never went on my visit, knocked Stanford off the list. And Fred ends up going to Ames and being a Hall of Famer and playing in the NBA for 10 years. But if I ever run into him, I'm going to tell him that story, because I just knew, because I grew up kind of playing with them and I knew their AAU program. I'm like, he's the mayor. The mayor's going to go to Ames. So I wasn't the mayor of St. Louis, but it became down to SLU and Mizzou, to be honest with you. Mizzou was very, very tempting. They were number 1 in the country at the time. They had Doug Smith and Anthony Peeler. They were rolling. But they actually, the day I got back from my visit to Mizzou, they got their NCAA sanctions and they were put on probation for a couple of years in the early 90s. And so they actually lost 3 of their 4 scholarships. So it was actually helped me make my decision, because it was kind of tough, because I knew at Mizzou, because how good they were, it was going to take me a couple of years to probably play. But it was tempting because they were number 1 in the country and they had everything rolling. And I knew at SLU I'd have an opportunity. But then after all the sanctions, it got a little muddied the water a little bit. And again, I don't know that I always wanted to stay home, but I knew that after college I wanted to be in St. Louis. And I knew that if I ultimately at the end of the day wanted to be in St. Louis, it would probably behoove me to stay close to home. And that has proven out to be true. And I got to play early, which helped me a lot in my career. We were terrible my freshman and not good my sophomore year, but I got to play early, which really helped my confidence. So more than you wanted to know.
No, well, how much of your playing early was a result of, you being ready, and how much of it was a result of attrition? Because that season you guys had like 7 or 8 guys leave throughout the year for different reasons. So I mean, you and Claggett, who we talked to about this too, you guys had nothing but opportunity, it seems like.
Yeah, and it really helped us, because we had guys leaving and getting hurt and transferring and walking off the bench. It was a wild year. And so it wasn't like we were like, we were not like these one and done kids that come in like polished up, ready for college basketball prime time. We were like just kids that had some promise, that got an opportunity early. But you guys have done your research. We were 5-5 to start the year, and I thought, okay, we're going to be fine. And then we lost 18 straight. So it was ugly, but we got a lot of reps. Clag and I got to play a ton, and that's what I needed, because I wasn't sure if I could play at that level or how effective I would be. And Rich Grauer, to his credit, was just like, I got no option, just go do it. And you kind of had to figure it out trial by error. And though we didn't win a lot of games, I actually tell people those 2 years were hugely instrumental in the foundation of setting the tone for what ended up being our last 2 years, which were great, and NCAA tournaments and ranked and all that stuff. But those first 2 years, if we hadn't had that experience, at least Clag and I think we can both speak to that, it might have been a different career for us and maybe outcome for the program.
What's it like going through a season where you lose? You rattle off. I mean, luckily you had Texas Christian in there to break up the monotony, but I mean, you lose. You go 0-10 in the conference. What's that like? I mean, does that just wear on a team? I mean, what's the attitude in the locker room?
Not good. And I, my whole life, I had this theology of like, I'm a winner. And most everybody comes into college thinking you're a winner, right? Because most of the guys have had success. That's why you're there. And I'd wanted everything I'd ever done, baseball, basketball, school, everything. And it was the first time in my life where I actually had real adversity. So it was a huge opportunity to grow as a young man, but it was super hard because I didn't know I was ashamed. I didn't want to go to class because I thought people would like looking down on us and like we were clowns. And then to add all of that, then Rich Grauer was like, I don't know if it was the last year of his contract, but we knew that the coach's job was in jeopardy. And my roommate was Kevin Grauer. So my best friend on the team was the coach's son. And one of my other good friends was Julian Winfield, whose dad was also on staff. So you had this sense of burden, like if we don't perform, they're going to lose their jobs. And they ended up losing their jobs. And the media was asking, meanwhile, like as the season went on, we're losing all these games. Then the media is asking you like, about your coach's security and the one that recruited you. And it just got really, really complicated for a young kid to try to process in real time. So it was really challenging.
It's pretty interesting, though. I mean, for a tough season, you guys still drew really well. And it really does kind of prophesize, I think that's a word, the 94, the later seasons where you guys are selling out the arena and Scott trade.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people kind of, even when we were young, I think they bought into the idea that we could be good, even when we weren't good. And there was probably something about the local angle. I'm a homer for that, but there's something about St. Louis and hometown kids that I think does draw people in. And so I think that helped lay some foundation. And then, then the next year we were 12 and 17, but you start to see like, hey, these kids have some promise. And then, you would add, I'm not to fast forward, but then you added like Donnie Dobbs and you started like Spoon started adding like little pieces. You're like, okay, they're not there yet, but they've got some promise if they can keep this band together. And so I think the St. Louis fans are really smart, and they kind of saw it early, and they're like, we should kind of get on, because you're right. We had some crowds my freshman year, 10,000 people. I mean, it's hard to get 10,000 people in Chaffetz right now, and the program's doing pretty good, really good. So I think people bought in before it was cool, and then when it really took off, it was like a light switch, and it just kind of took off like a flame.
And before we get to that moment, I'm kind of wondering where's your head at when Grauer's contract isn't renewed, or when he's fired, or however they put it at the time. Did you ever consider transferring or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I don't know if you talked to Clag about that, but we both
Yeah,
got
we
our
did.
releases, and yeah, we were both very serious about transferring. Thought we would. There was a month there or something. There was some period of time where we didn't have a coach, and then I was actually getting ready to go to Mizzou the day that Spoonhour got the job. So, after I got my release, then I started talking to Mizzou coaches again, because they had kept track of me, and I had a nice freshman year, and they're like, great, you're ready to roll now. And they were losing some guys, and so I was literally going to go make my visit there. I wasn't necessarily committed to going there, but I was kind of going. I was driving to Columbia that afternoon, the morning Spoon got the job, and Spoon had recruited me, and so I knew him and liked him a lot. We really as a family really liked him and bonded with him. Just didn't want to go to Springfield for school. Just wanted to stay close to home, but liked him a lot. So he calls me and goes, "Hey," he literally calls me and goes, "Hey, I know you're going to Columbia this afternoon. Before you go down there to meet with Norm, I want you to come meet with me in my office." So I was like, okay, it's a new coach. Out of respect for him, I should go listen to what the man has to say. And so I go visit with him. Let's say it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he listen. This is literally his pitch to me. He goes, "Listen, I tried to get you to come down to Springfield, and you didn't. So I took this job. So if you go to Mizzou," he's like, "I'm just going to go take Norm's job." So he goes, "You might as well save the gas money and stay here and play for me." And he started laughing. He goes, "Listen, this is not life and death. We're going to have a lot of fun. I want to make basketball fun again for you. It's my job. It's not your job." And literally, that was it. That was like 30 seconds. And I walked out of the room and I called my parents, and I'm like, "I'm staying. I'm staying. This is a guy I want to play." But I think my next call was probably to Clag. And like, I'm staying. I don't know if he called me or I called him, but I was like, "I'm staying." Never went to Mizzou, called him, called Norm Stewart, said, "I'm not visiting. It's over." Just because I just felt right away. Spoon had that charisma around him. Like you just felt like you could trust him. He just said the right words at the right time that I needed to hear. And I didn't have any proof that he was right, but sure turned out to be right.
Our medium here on podcasting is kind of skews younger. And I mean, I had some experience watching Spoon. I was born '89, so I got a little bit of Spoon. I still don't even remember much of Larry Hughes. Um, but what was Spoon's reputation for those that may be a bit too young to remember that?
Yeah. Um, you know, Spoon was just magnetic. He was just magnetic. I don't know how else to say it, but how people talk about Whitey Herzog in St. Louis, and they talk about Jack Buck in St. They talk about, and I didn't know either one of those guys, but they just kind of seem like larger than life, magnetic personalities. Spoon was like that guy that he was super funny, super witty, kind of gave you this, oh, country boy, shucks, I'm not very smart. I'm from Rogers, Arkansas, but smart as a fox and witty. And I mean, to this day, I have people come up to me all the time and they're like, hey, I ran into Spoon at Culpepper's back in the day. And I sat and had a beer with them. And they're like, they feel like he was their best friend. And Spoon wouldn't even remember the conversation, but he was just that much of a, almost like a Pied Piper. Again, the best analogy I can give you, again, even though your younger viewers and listeners might not know that, but like a Jack Buck, Whitey Herzog, somebody who's just super engaging. And people would say to me like, oh, I came because I really like Spoon. Like they would come to watch him coach, which I thought was weird. I'm like, he's like a old guy who never played. Like, what do you mean by that? But I think he would connect with people on media. He would connect with people in the community. He was very visible. He was out and about in the Cardinals games, and he was very out and about. And so people connected to him and just wanted to support that guy. And I mean, honestly, Lorenzo Romar was a bit like that. I mean, to me, I mean, just a gracious, gracious human being. But Spoon was probably just out in the community a little bit more. He was on KMOX. He would do open line with Jack Buck, and he wasn't doing it to market. It's just who he was. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Zach, but that's kind of how I think about him.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of I agree with that completely as kind of an outsider and somebody who does remember that era a little more. And you're right, St. Louis always does love those kind of folksy type coaches. But I'm wondering how different was it once practice starts up? Like how different is he than Grauer as a practice coach?
Yeah, again, I should say, I mean, I'm super grateful to Rich Grauer. I mean, he's the one that recruited me. He was a relentless recruiter. I mean, handwritten notes every day for years. And one thing I always remember, because my daughter just went through recruiting, and you always remember the first one who loved you. And Rich Grauer told me when I was a sophomore in high school that I need a two guard in your spot in that class, and you're my guy until you tell me no.
Hmm.
And now I realize how rare that is,
Yeah.
because most people like give like 10 offers and they hope, sorry, you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah. You're fine.
Okay. Sometimes, you'll give 10 offers and, maybe there's only 3 spots, but Rich Grauer was like, you're my guy until you tell me you're not. And he just he's just great integrity, but those guys were very different. I mean, Grauer was like, you have a 10-page scouting report, watch 3 hours of film. Uh, Grauer would have been an incredible like advanced scout in the NBA. Like, hey, go watch the Nuggets play and draw up their 12 out of bounds plays and what they do and how to scheme them. It's incredible at that. Spoon was much more principle based. Like, hey, this is what we do, and these principles just apply. And we're not going to practice for 3 hours or watch 3 hours of tape. We're going to practice really hard for an hour and a half. We're going to watch 5 minutes of tape and get you out of here. So they were very different human beings, both very effective, but almost polar opposites in terms of style and how they went about it.
I
But
think,
Spoon was serious. I mean, when you're on the court, he wasn't. I mean, the hour and a half, 2 hours you were on the court, he wasn't telling jokes. It was hardcore, and he was such a defensive minded coach, which I hated. Like we would spend, if we have a 2 hour practice, we spend an hour and 45 minutes on shell defense.
hmm.
And Clag and I would look at each other like, come on, man, we know. But he knew he didn't have to. He knew we could score, but he didn't know if we could defend. So, and that was kind of who he was. He grew up with like Henry Iba and the guys that taught him how to coach. They were all defensive minded.
You mentioned defensive minded. Let's talk about the Highmark rule. How did that how did that come about? And I mean, did it get that name later, or was that like kind of in the moment?
You mean the plus minus rule?
That's the Highmark rule, sir.
I didn't know it was coined that. But
It's the Highmark rule. After this year, maybe the Gibson Jemmerson rule for all we know.
Why don't you define it for us, Zach, just so everybody knows what you mean?
I'm not a great definer, but I'll give my best shot. I'm a terrible storyteller too. If anybody who listens knows that already, it's basically if you can score more than the person you're guarding can score in a game, the idea that you're not good at defense is moot. It's a moot point. Do I have that right?
yeah, it's like in hockey, they have plus minus. In basketball, they have plus minus scores now, right?
Right.
So Spoon would always say, joke, kind of half jokingly, like, "Hey, listen, I'll leave you out there as long as you outscore the guy that you're defending, because I know you're not a very good defender. So you better put up on the offensive end, or you're just not going to play, because you're certainly not giving us much on the defensive end. So you better produce on the other end." And he was only half kidding. That was pretty much our agreement. And if you ever saw, I mean, I was slow footed, and I mean, I had to just grind to just be okay, just to not be a liability. And even then I was a liability at times.
Do you think you would have excelled more in a Majerus defensive scheme that, he did have a few guys that were a little bit slower, but really focused on angles and positioning?
Yeah, I do. I really admired the way that he taught that both ends of the floor. But yeah, it was much more a contained, like Spoon wanted like to deny every wing, like literally deny every pass. And then, but then the problem is I could deny the wing, but then if the point guard gets beat, then I got to be there to help him too. I'm not, and I used to tell him, like, listen, I can't do both. I can't deny on the wing 35 feet from the basket. And then if Clyde gets beat, I can't get over and stop his guy and then recovery out to I mean, I just can't do it. It's just, what do you want me to do? And so we would have these negotiations, like, is it more important to deny the wing pass, like literally like deny everything, or to stop the ball in the paint? Because I can't do both at the level that you want. But so to answer your question, I think I would have done better in a little bit more of a contained defense with a lot of help side, or like, hey, let's push everybody to baseline where I know I have help. But again, it worked. Amazingly, it worked, because you mentioned Jeff Harris. Like, we had no rim protectors. It's not like we were funneling guys to, Willie Reed at the rim, or, Francis Okoro. We didn't have size at the rim. So we had to kind of contain the ball okay, because, jumping over Jeff Harris and Tim Duncan did not have a problem finishing at the rim against us. So I don't know really how we did it. Honestly, I just think we outscored people. That was kind of our deal.
Before we get all the way to Tim Duncan later in your career, you kick off this season, the first game under Spoon. You go out to Pauley Pavilion and play at UCLA. What was that experience like for you guys?
Yeah, good research there. It was awesome. So I remember that for a couple of reasons, because we went to Muscle Beach, Venice Beach. That was cool. So that was fun for.
Did you take your shirt off?
I definitely did not at that point. Oh my gosh.
Who on the team would have fit in at Muscle Beach the most?
Oh man, like personality wise, or like just jacked?
Sure.
Those probably go hand in hand.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Who was just chiseled was, you probably don't remember him, is Carlos McCauley. He's our point guard from Charleston, Missouri. He was just chiseled. But he was so shy and humble. He wouldn't peacock around like you'd want him to. Jeff Harris would peacock around, but he didn't have the look. He was a little chunky from Little Rock, and his diet wasn't too tight. But none of us really would have fit in at Muscle Beach. But at UCLA, Pauley Pavilion, couple things I remember. I guess three things I remember. John Wooden at the game, sitting right behind the UCLA bench. And we all got to go up and shake his hand. I mean, that was a moment,
Yeah, no pressure.
That was cool. Kevin Bacon was at the game because he was doing research for some terrible basketball movie that he ended up doing. You could Google it. I don't know what it was, like The Air Up There.
The Air Up There. Yeah, that's right.
Was that it?
Yeah.
And he was doing research on that movie, so he was there, and I think he came to our shoot around. It was just weird. It was just odd. Kid and Play was at the game, which was pretty cool, and that was when he was he had the big high top fade, and he came in the locker room, I think. So anyway, all that to be said, the game we were winning, we were beating UCLA at halftime. And I remember, and they had Ed O'Bannon and Tyus Edney, and I mean they were loaded. It was the core group of guys that ended up winning the national championship in '95.
Right.
And I remember like we went to the locker room and we looked at each other and we're like, we are beating UCLA in Pauley Pavilion. Like, and honestly, it was like that moment that we realized we were beating UCLA in Pauley that we were like doomed to lose. Like we came out in the second half and just it became too real to us because we started thinking about it and they just rolled us in the second half. But it was pretty dang cool.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this season, like you said before, it was still a challenging season. You guys still took your lumps, and it wound up being a losing season overall. But I mean, you could. It seems like the pieces were in place. Like there were some personnel changes, and you've got a year under Spoon. Could you really kind of feel things building?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, the year my sophomore year that you're talking about was the most probably the most rewarding year of basketball I ever had because basketball started to become fun again. And you could see it, you could just see it internally coming. And even though I think we won one or two games in conference, like not many. And but we beat Marquette in the conference tournament down in Memphis. And it was like a quarterfinal game or something, a meaningless conference tournament game, but we beat Marquette. And I think we had not beaten them at that. They were really good. And I remember literally, sounds corny to you guys, like we were crying in the locker room, like crying like tears of joy, like because we knew how much we had given and like to get the payoff was like so sweet. And then it also, we knew like it set the tone for the next year. It's like, hey, we're not there yet, but man, we are close and things are going to roll next year. And I even to this day, coaches were crying, we were crying like tears of joy as 19-year-old kids because we won a quarterfinal game. I still look back, you think that's weird. It is, but it was kind of like the culmination of 2 years of hardship and feeling like, all right, we turned the corner, and we may not win the conference championship this year, but we're going to be right there next year. So yeah, that was I always say the year we were 12-17, my sophomore year, was the most rewarding year of all my basketball.
That tournament was at the Pyramid.
Yeah.
Have you been since it's a Bass Pro Shop?
I have not. I wanted to go this year. Not obviously they don't play there anymore, but I have not. But I know it's a Bass Pro Shop, and that was you guys are too young. That place was amazing. Like they in Memphis was rocking. I mean, rocking 22,000 people there every time we played down there. And obviously Penny Hardaway was there, and it was it was one of the best places in America to play. If I could tell a quick story, I think my sophomore year, we're playing down there. I think it was my sophomore year, and Penny Hardaway, we are tied. No, we are Memphis is winning by two. This is classic Memphis. They had a coach named Larry Finch, not the greatest X's and O guy of all time. So they have all kinds of talent. They're up by two. We're playing defense. We're scrambling around trying to foul them. One of their guys, Billy Smith, decides to shoot like a 15-footer contested jumper. Why? I don't know. Just because he thought he needed to score. They're up two, shoots it with 5 seconds to go. I get a rebound. I'm 90 feet from the basket, down two. I got no chance, right? Penny Hardaway comes, wraps me up, fouls me on purpose. Boop, foul. Okay, two shots, down by two in the Pyramid, 22,000 people there. They call timeout. I played really well. I think I had 25 that game. So I felt like I was in a good flow. I had a good game. They call timeout. I don't know. I probably shot 80% or something from the line. So I felt good about it. Go up to the line, back rim, missed the first one. And then I had to intentionally miss the second one to try to scramble around. We ended up losing. And one of my buddies went to Indiana, and my high school teammates, and he called me after the game. And at the time, not every game was streaming, right? There was like one or two games on a night. And he calls me later that night and was like, "Hey, it was really cool. Like ESPN cut away, and they're like, 10th ranked Memphis State getting ready to be upset by St. Louis University in the pyramid. Scott Highmark's at the line to force overtime." And so they cut away to whatever the game was to show me miss my free throw. So I tell my kids that all the time. And I'm like, we all fail sometimes on a big stage, sometimes on a little stage. But that was my the pyramid story. That's what I remember a lot about the pyramid.
Oh, it's humbling. I remember the pyramid too. We played there in my era. They didn't transition to the FedEx Forum until I think it was my senior year.
Yeah.
After the Grizzlies had moved there and everything.
But were they rocking like the crowds like when you were down there?
Oh yeah, yeah. They were
out?
they were still good in our era. I don't know if it was always sold out, but and we actually had the opportunity when the NBA team had just moved there to see them as well, because they were being coached at the time by Terry Porter, who played in college with Brad Soderberg, who was our head coach.
Yep.
So he got us tickets to the game, and we all went to that.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Memphis was drawing really well. And my senior year, we played them in the first round at the FedEx Forum in the conference tournament there. I think they won by 20, 25. It was a rough year.
Yeah.
But regardless, yeah, that's a big change from the FedEx Forum or to the FedEx Forum after the pyramid. That was a crazy place. I'm looking, you guys start your junior year, your third year at SLU, and it's a jarring improvement on paper, just how hot it is. You start 14-0, and you've got wins over SMU, Creighton, Arizona State, Memphis, DePaul. It didn't end until you guys split a home and home week with Marquette, and then you put out another 5-game win streak, and all of a sudden you're 19-1 in your first 20. I'm kind of wondering what all went into the stew that season that made it such an incredible start.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, like I think it goes back to that end of the sophomore year. Like I feel like that finish gave us momentum. Like it didn't really surprise us. Like we knew we were going to get it rolling. And we also knew H. Waldman was sitting out, and not everybody knew that. So he was sitting out practicing, and people had no idea how good he was. And we're like, yeah, he's going to be a difference maker, because you had, Claggett was developing, I was developing, Donnie Dobbs had just come from junior college, was legitimate, bona fide 16 to 18 a game guy. And then you add H, and then Jeff Harris, I think, came in that year as well, even though he was young. But so it didn't really surprise us that we got on a roll like that. I think the Arizona State game, we went down to Arizona. We played in Tucson. So we played Arizona State. Marquette played Arizona. So it was like a not Conference USA, Great Midwest, Pac-10 or Pac-12 challenge or something. And we played Arizona State. And I remember we beat them, and they were really good at the time. By the way, that was the year of the point shaving with Hedeke Smith. I don't know if you guys
Oh,
follow
yeah.
that.
Wow.
We played them the very year. I don't know if I couldn't verify. That'd be good research for you guys to find out if our game wasn't part of that whole indictment, but we played them in 94.
Wow.
With Hedeke Smith. So they were really good, but the Zach's Googling it right away. So,
yeah.
but then I think we beat, I don't know if you have the schedule there. We played Iowa State. I remember we beat Iowa State and early, I think, in that year, but
yeah, that was later in the year. That was February.
Later in the year? Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, the start didn't really surprise us, because like the second half of my sophomore year, the crowd started building, and like again, you could kind of feel the momentum building. And then by the junior year, it was like, hey, this team is locked and loaded and ready to go. And it didn't really surprise us. I do remember a big moment is when we played Iowa State. The Sports Illustrated came and did an article on us. And at the time, Sports Illustrated was like the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like one issue a week or one issue a month. And there was a feature like whatever's Alexander Wolf, like the big Sports Illustrated writer, was coming to do a feature on the Billikens. And that was a big deal. And I remember he came to practice and everybody's like, oh man, the guy from Sports Illustrated's here. And they wrote like a 5-page deal. And I do remember that going, wow, we've kind of arrived. When
Right.
Sports Illustrated shows up to do something like that, you're probably doing something right. But anyway, I don't know. It didn't surprise us. Our start didn't surprise us. And we just kind of kept it rolling.
What about your finish? Did that surprise you? Because after that 19-1 start, you guys actually go 4-5 in the last 9 games.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we didn't finish great. And that even carried over to the NCAA tournament. Like I don't know if the schedule got harder, but I remember our league was really good. I mean, think about our league. We had Cincinnati, Memphis, Marquette was really good. DePaul was good. You know, they weren't like the DePaul that you think of now. Dayton and UAB was really good at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, our league was hard. So it's not surprising that we fell off, but I do feel like we lost some momentum as the year went on. And I think I also remember that our legs we had to play a lot of minutes. We weren't super deep and probably took a little bit of a toll on us when we got deep into the conference and the conference season and then into the tournament. I do have a funny tournament story in my junior year. If you want to talk about that now or later, but I do have a funny story.
Oh,
As everyone who listens to this knows, I love stories.
Okay.
I can't tell them, but I love them.
Well, this is a couple things struck me as we went to the tournament. We played in Wichita, Kansas. I think we were like a 7 seed.
Yeah.
And Maryland was a 10 seed. Terrible draw. I mean, They had Joe Smith was the #1 pick in the draft. I mean, they had Dwayne Simpkins. They had pros, but they were like 500 in the ACC. So we got a 10 seed. We have to play a 10 seed, and we're a 7, so we're favored. But we're playing the #1 pick in the draft in Wichita. We have the 11:20 Central game, 11:20 a.m. First game of the tournament. You know, that always starts on Thursday. 11:20. That was our slot in Wichita, and I remember going out for warm-ups, and Billy Packer and Jim Nance were doing our game, and it was just one of those moments where you're like, "Holy cow, this is a big moment!" Right? It's like when Dick Vitale came and did one of our games, and maybe I overanalyzed everything, right? So I just remember when Jim Nance and Billy Packer, who were like the voice, they were the A team for CBS for 30 years or 25 years, and they were doing our game. Everybody's like heart started like beating fast. And so I could tell in warm-ups, everybody was super nervous. So we go through warm-ups, we go back in, the national anthem. It's like 2 minutes to tip. We're getting ready to go back out. And Spoon Hour goes to Donnie Dobbs. He's like, Donnie. And Donnie was really kind of cocky and always like sure of himself, like, man, I got this. We're good. I'm going to dominate Joe Smith. I mean, he was always, he had a high belief in himself. And, which I love, but Spoon goes, Donnie, you good? And he goes, I'm good, coach. He goes, you nervous? He's like, no, I'm not nervous at all. And he goes, well, why is your shooting shirt on backwards then? And you look at his shirt and it said Dobbs right across his neck. And I was like, we are in trouble. If Donnie's nervous, we are all in trouble. And that was emblematic of the whole game. We were a mess.
Body Love wasn't feeling it that game, huh?
Body Love wasn't feeling it. H was sick, like literally sick. He was on IVs. We were a mess. But we had to go through that because you don't know what it's like to play in the tournament. Like, you just have to do it because it can be overwhelming if you like grow up watching it on TV and then you walk out and there's the bright lights and Billy Packer and Jim Nance are sitting there and you're like, man, how do I process all this? But then the other part of that day is we chartered our flight back. So our game was 11:20, probably over at 1:30, did a little media. We were probably literally in the air at 2. And I was back in my apartment at SLU at like 4:30 that day. And I'm watching the tournament that day, and I'm like, I think we just played in that tournament. Like, it's over, but I think we just played in it. And it was just the weirdest feeling in the world, because like we were just like in a whirlwind. We're back in our apartment. And it was over.
Yeah, Claggett, when we had him on, complained about the start time more than anything else. He said if you guys played he said if you guys played later in the day, you would have won.
All right, Clag. That's classic Clag. He didn't want to get anything started early, right? It could be true, because Clag had a lot to do with our success. So whatever Clag says goes.
Well, he actually had a pretty good game. He and Donnie had a pretty good game, but it looks like kind of Joe Smith just went off, and that was that.
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah, that was the. What did he have? Do you have the stats in front of you?
Yeah, he had 29 and 15.
Yeah. Well, there's a theme. There's a theme in their two losses in the NCAA tournament during my career.
Yeah,
Joe Smith had 29 to 15, and I think Tim Duncan had 30 and 18 or something like that. He had a
yeah,
lot.
something like that.
I know he had 30. So there's a theme there.
That's unbelievable. I love that. I Donnie Dobbs was another one of my favorites. I couldn't tell you why I love Donnie Dobbs, but I love Donnie. It might have been my simple brain and the alliteration, and the double B. I think it was just something about double D. Sorry, double D.
Donnie Dobbs was
There's
the
four
only
D's
guy.
in that name.
There are a lot of D's. Donnie's the
Four.
only one. When Anthony Bonner would come back in the summer when he was playing in the NBA, and he would come back and play with us, the only guy that would mess with him was Donnie Dobbs. Like, the rest of us were scared to death. Like, I'm like, we didn't want to touch him. We didn't want him to touch us. I mean, he was just like this Greek god. But Donnie would just be talking smack and going right at him, and just, you're nothing. I got your number. You can't guard me. And I'm like, guy plays for the Knicks, man. He plays with Anthony Mason and John Starks, and Donnie would just give it to him. But I mean, just supreme confidence.
We heard, at least I heard, I don't remember, I think it was Jeff Harris who said Bonner's drinking game was NBA level too.
There's no question about that. Yeah, he in his prime, it was unbelievable. Because then he'd come back the next morning, and we might have an 8 a.m. run, and he's good to go. And nobody else could do that. I mean, nobody else had the stamina that Anthony Bonner is elite.
I'd love to see the stat lines. Beers drank between Cody Ellis and Anthony Bonner the night before a game, and then the points scored in the game the next day. Because Cody Ellis was another one of those kind of guys. You'd see him at Humphreys the night before, like Dayton, and you're like, dude, you got the Arch Baron Cup tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I know Cody could do. I would take. I didn't see Cody in his prime at Humphreys, but I saw Bonner, and I'd take Bonner all day long for my Mount Rushmore of get after it.
So you guys are officially a big deal coming out of your junior year into your senior year, and you've got another great start this season. You start 8-0, you've got wins over Creighton, and then the return games. Well, I guess that was a return game, Creighton and SMU. You win down at Carbondale. But one of the games this season that was kind of the most interesting to me, you played number 4 UMass at home, and you're playing in a brand new arena. I remember this game being a huge deal. I know it was a national TV game. It sold out, great crowd. What was the experience going into this game and then during this game like for you guys?
Yeah, it was unbelievable, because UMass, what you said, they were ranked 4th at the time.
They were 4th at the time, yeah.
But I mean, they had been number
Right.
1 like a lot of the season, and Calipari was there, and it was a big deal. Dick Vitale did our game. It was featured ESPN. It was a double header. Somebody, Marquette, played somebody before us. I don't even remember who. But here's how big a deal it was. Like, our game was like 8 o'clock game, and we used to be able to park inside the Enterprise Center.
On the ramp.
On the ramp. We got to drive into the ramp. I don't know how it works. They don't need to do that shape it's, but we would drive into the thing and on the ramp inside our car. And it was like whatever, 6 o'clock or whenever we were supposed to be there 2 hours before the game. And I had 3 or 4 of my teammates with me, and the perimeter around what is now Enterprise was like all blocked off with police. Like you couldn't get within a mile of Enterprise. And so I had to stop at all these security checkpoints and say, we're players, we're playing in the game. And we had to like literally pull our jerseys out to show them that we were players. And we had to like navigate our way through downtown St. Louis to get inside of Enterprise. And then I remember, well, first of all, I remember going to shoot around that day, back up a little bit. Dick Vitale came to our shoot around, and the one I don't know that much about Dick Vitale, but one thing I know is that he did his homework. So he comes up to me at 10 o'clock the morning of our game without any notes and goes, Scott Highmark, 1991 Parkway West state championship, scored 30 points in the state championship game, 11 points in overtime. He starts reeling off my resume. 2-time academic All-American. I mean, he's just going down my resume. And then he goes to Claggett and does the same thing. He goes to H. Waldman. And I just had great respect for that, because I've done games, and at 10 o'clock on the day of the game, I don't know all the stuff that he knew. And it told me that he actually did his homework. And so I've always appreciated that about Vitale. At least that day he had done his homework. But meanwhile, we get to the game, and like the Billy Packer Jim Nance moment when we walked out of the NCAA tournament, I walked out of that locker room for the UMass game, and it was like, for us, it was like a Super Bowl. It was like lights, camera, people were taking pictures, 20 sold out at Enterprise. And it was like, this is a moment, this is a big moment. And then you walk out, and Calipari's there, and Lou Rowe and Marcus Camby, and they've got Refuse to Lose on the back of their jerseys. And they just kind of had that, like, that look like, man, I don't think we can play with these guys, and it was a cool moment, but we did not have a very good game. We did not give them our best. I think it ended up being closer than it was, but that's one of those games you wish you had back, because it was a really, really cool moment on a national stage. And it was probably too big for us, because we had never, we just had never been on that big of a stage. But it was a great moment.
You mentioned the kind of circus around that game, and there was kind of a celebrity a local celebrity circus. You talked about like Kid and Play, Kevin Bacon out in UCLA. In St. Louis, we had a bunch of local celebrities that were friends with Spoon Hour. As you mentioned, Spoon Hour was friends with everybody. But there's a story Jeff Harris told, and it's about an intoxicated Brett Hull.
I know that story.
Knocking on the locker room door. What is your recollection of Brett Hull desperately seeking Spoon?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a great story. The way I remember that is like I think it was the UMass game, and we're getting ready to go. It's like 5 minutes before game time, and there's a knock on the opposite side of the door, not the way we go out, but the other side, which nobody ever goes out that way. And I remember, I think Donnie Dobbs went and answers the door, and was like, we're like, who was that? And he's like, I don't know, and like closed the door or something on him. Like he had no idea who Brett Hull was. And one of us, somebody saw like, dude, that's Brett Hull. That's the golden one. Let him in. Let him in. That's Brett Hull. But somebody didn't recognize him, and it was awkward for a moment. And yeah, he was in his flow for sure. And he just wanted to say hi to Spoon and the team before the game, I guess. But how did Jeff tell it? Was it different than that?
He just kept knocking and like pounding on the door. I got to see Spoon. I know Spoon. We're friends with Spoon. Like, that's how he kind of told it. But I mean,
I think that's partially true. I think they're both true. But whoever answered the door did not know who Brett Hull was. I remember that.
So that back door of that locker room, that's the hallway that the hockey players come out of, because the Blues locker room is down that hallway, right. and then it goes out to off their bench onto the ice, but you guys go out the other door because it's kind of in the corner.
Exactly.
So I know exactly where he was. Yep. It's kind of the setup.
Oh, there. Yeah. Oh, another good quick hockey story. So we're playing at the old arena, I don't remember what year it was. I'm getting taped. So the Blues would play at 8 o'clock at night, and we would play at 1 o'clock. And they would have to leave the door open kind of to the outside to make sure the ice stayed cold enough during morning skate around. Because so we would shoot at 8 o'clock. We do shoot around at 8 o'clock. Then they would take up the floor, and the visiting team would come in and skate and do their skate around. Then they put the floor back down. Long story short, so I'm getting my ankles taped at 8 o'clock in the morning for a shoot around on a Saturday morning. And guy pokes his head in and goes, "Hey, you got a ball? We want to shoot around." And I look up, I'm like, "It's Wayne Gretzky." And I tell the trainer, I'm like, "Hold that thought." And I jump off the table and I run out there, and I find a ball, and we go out, and me and Luke Robitaille and Wayne Gretzky play horse. And it was an incredible moment. I didn't have a camera. I wasn't able to memorialize it, but it was really, really cool.
Did you win?
The only downside was Wayne Gretzky was maybe the most uncoordinated shooter of a basketball I've ever seen, which kind of kills me. Oh yeah, he had no idea. Like, he had never done it before in his life. But I got to play horse with Wayne Gretzky, which was pretty cool.
We're getting into a lot of nostalgia about the old arena. Did you watch the implosion when it went to? I remember exactly where I was, who I was with. It was a very weird situation I was in. That doesn't matter. Nobody cares. But did you watch it, and kind of how did you feel? You spent 3 years, through a lot of time, 3 years of your life there.
Yeah, definitely watched it. I drove down, whatever, on Highway 40 and pulled off the side of the road and watched it. And I don't know how my parents have, like, the seats they used to sit in, the yellow seats. They still have them in their basement. So somehow we acquired those or stole them or bought them or whatever. But yeah, it was, man, it was special. That place was, it just had some magic in it. I don't know what it is. Like, I love the Enterprise was great. It was shiny and new, but something about the arena, man, it had character to it. And like, even in our games, like, sometimes the crowd would get big and it would look smoky and billowy, and like, you're like, it just had character.
Like
And
old time Celtics games.
yeah, like the old Garden. I don't know. Maybe I just remember it, too fondly, but I felt like it had a lot of character.
Claggett said it was also it was a nice shooting backdrop, and then
Oh,
also the rims, the backboards and rims there were really favorable to shooters, and that you guys actually had to move down to the new place.
totally. No, he's 100. That's the other reason we love the rims were super soft. And honestly, when we moved to the Scott Trade Enterprise, they put, I mean, brand spanking new rims, super tight. And I remember this I tell Clag this. Clag was the only one that could shoot at the new building, because the rest, I mean, because Clag's shot was so pure and he had so much arch on it. He was the only one that would, like, he'd shoot it and the net wouldn't even move. But we would literally have practices, and we'd shoot like 20% from three, like wide open, and we'd walk away and we're like, Clag's the only one that could shoot in this new building. Because we were used to the old barn, and you could just kind of let it fly and you'd get good bounces, and the shooting background was real dark, which is good for a shooter. You don't want a lot of space, and you don't want, like, light colors, because it's hard to make out where you're focusing.
Have you shot a lot at Chaffetz? And because there's this, I think it's incorrect, and I think it's overblown, but that shots, shooters don't shoot well when they come to SLU. You look at, like, a guy like Dwayne Polk, who came through. He had a bit of a shooter's reputation in high school, came in, didn't shoot well. Do you think Chaffetz is a good place to shoot?
Yeah, I do. I've shot plenty there, and I like the dark background. The dark blue seats is great. Like, I mean, have you ever? I don't know if you guys ever remember, like, even the where Mizzou plays now. I hate the yellow seats. Like, I've tried to shoot. That's terrible background. But the dark blue with a little darker lighting on it, I think it's I think it's great shooting. I mean, I've been in a lot of gyms. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And obviously,
Hmm.
clearly, we've had shooters shoot or shoot, and love Dwayne Polk, but
Yeah.
not,
I mean, he
not
didn't. He played most of his games at Scott Trade anyway. That was just my the glaring example of a shooter who came to SLU and kind of lost it.
uh, yeah, I wouldn't buy that. I wouldn't put the conditions on that, from what I can tell.
You said you guys weren't ready for the big stage of UMass, but do you think that big stage kind of helped you down the stretch that season? Because you wind up with a similar record to the year before,
Yeah,
but you're a lot more effective down the stretch.
yeah, definitely, no question. Yeah, you play that game again. You can't teach experience you don't have. So having the experience of playing in big games, playing in the tournament, playing a top, team like UMass on a huge stage. Then you go into the conference championship. We lost, on a really tough shot to Cincinnati at the buzzer in
Right.
our senior year. I mean, should have won that game. But then we go into the tournament and we're playing Minnesota, and I think it was an 8-9 game.
Hmm.
But like we were fully expecting to win that game. By then, we're like we had the scar tissue and the battle wounds, and we're vets now. We totally had a different mindset going into that game than we did before, and we had played against number one picks and number one teams and fancy coaches and big platforms, and no, there's no question it helped us when we went to Baltimore my senior year. We were totally ready, and we had a real sense of desperation. Like we wanted to stay the weekend. I mean, I did, because we had such a quick in and out in Wichita. It was like, man, if we could win a game, we get to stay the whole weekend and literally bathe in the NCAA experience. And I know we all wanted to do that because we knew what the alternative was to be back in our apartment in like 2 hours. But
Yeah.
but I think we were totally ready. Even again, we won in overtime, so it's not like we like blew out Minnesota. But I just felt like we were a lot more prepared that year.
One of the things we didn't get into this last time we talked about your draw, but in addition to the NCAA tournament experience, I guess it starts with that selection show experience. What was that like those 2 years? You're pretty close both years on that kind of 7, 8, 9
Yeah.
line. Um, what was your reaction? Where were you guys at? What was the selection show like both times?
Yeah, I think we were actually, I don't think we did a whole, I don't remember that we did like a made for television, like jump
Hmm.
up and do the whole deal. I think we were in the locker room at least one year. I know we were. Maybe we were in Bush Center or something like that another year, but I mean, it was really cool moment to see your name on the screen because I mean, your whole life you dream about doing that. It was super cool. We didn't really care who we played. We just wanted to be in, but we also knew we were in both years. It wasn't like, oh
Yeah.
man, I wonder if we're in. We knew we were in. It was just a matter of what seed we got. And again, ironically, we got a higher seed my junior year than our senior year, but I think we were a better team my senior year than my junior year. So um, yeah, that's still a man. I get goosebumps every time I watch the selection show, even to this day, because I just know how special it is. It's just there's just something about being able to do that and play in the big show. And I don't care if you're playing in the first four in Dayton or you're a 16 seed and you get smoked in the first round. It's super special. So I still get goosebumps, and I remember vividly when our name went up on the screen. And in our my junior year was the first time in 30 some odd years. I mean, it was a novelty. It was a generational thing my junior year.
Yeah, and that's circling back actually to Coach Grauer. I think people kind of underrate him as a SLU coach because they forget just how bad SLU basketball was before he took over, and he
Yeah.
really kind of bridged it. Even though his last year or two didn't go well, he did bridge it to Coach Spoon, and at least made them somewhat relevant and competitive again. Built a little bit
Yeah.
of a foundation.
Well, I can tell you this for me for sure, and I could probably speak for Clag. Like if they don't, if Bonner and Monroe Douglas and Roland Gray and Jeff Luchtefeld and Charlie Newberry, if that crew and coach led by Coach Grauer, if they don't go to the NIT finals and make a deep run those years, we probably don't go to SLU
Right.
because even though they couldn't beat Xavier in the conference championship to make the tournament because it was a one bid league at the time, they could never quite beat Xavier. But they went deep. They went to the NIT finals twice when I was making my decision about college. And so, yeah, I mean, he totally laid the groundwork and took that program from out of the abyss to make it relevant to the point. Not only did they get to the NIT finals twice, but he put them in a position to get invited to the Conference USA. And
Right.
if they don't get invited to Conference USA, I'm not going there. Clagg's not going there. Julian Winfield's not going there. It's a game changer. When we got to play Cincinnati and Memphis and Marquette, I mean, that was a huge draw for us.
So you guys beat Minnesota in overtime your senior year. Now you've got Wake Forest, like we mentioned before, the 1 seed. Because when you're an 8 or a 9, you get the great fortune of a very winnable first round game,
Yep.
followed by a not very winnable second round game. But you're tied at halftime against Tim Duncan, Randolph Childress, and everybody else on this team, and it's looking like you guys have a shot to win this thing. What's the rest of the game like?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't feel like we ever felt like we couldn't beat them. I mean, we knew we were going to have our hands full with Duncan, and Randolph Childress was a pro, and they had a guy named Ricky Parole, who was a Spaniard that was a pro, and Rusty LaRue was on that team, who ended up being a pro for a long time as well. I mean, they had a lot of pros, but I don't remember us feeling like we couldn't beat them. And like you said, it was tied at half, and we didn't play our best basketball. Like Clag and H did not have their best games, and we hung with them. Usually between Clag, H, and myself, usually like 2 of the 3 of us would have, we'd get it going. And again, I think I had probably the best matchup, but I don't remember Clag. And I think Clag was 3 for 18 or something. He did not have a great shooting night, and neither did H. And if they have a normal night, we probably have a chance to beat them. And again, they would probably say that themselves. But even that being said, I think I had a 3 from the corner with like a minute and a half down 3, and I airballed it. So, I mean, we had chances to be right in the game, even though I don't think we played our best game, and we were a little worn out by then. But I just didn't think, we were just at that point where we didn't feel like anybody was not beatable.
Do you think? Well, I'm curious because you mentioned the airball 3, and that, of course, gives me flashbacks to Rob Lowe and the 2011-12 Billikens, and they had a chance. They were there with Michigan State. Did you also see a lot of parallels in that team? Obviously, they were 8-9. They were in that 8-9 matchup going to the 1 seed.
Yep. Yeah. I was at that game too. So yeah, I mean, I think, I think the 8-9 game is always just like a battle, right? I mean, it's just kind of is what it is. But those are like pick'em games, but then like you said, you get the 1 seed, but the way we viewed it is like all the pressure's on them. All the pressure's on Tim Duncan. He's supposed to be the number 1 pick in the draft, and they got pros, and Randolph Childress put on a show in the ACC tournament. So we didn't feel a ton of pressure in that game. And we had already, I mean, I don't want to say this, but we had accomplishing our goal was we need to win a game in the tournament. Like that's a big deal. And we did that. And then we were kind of like, hey, we're playing with house money. We're playing Wake Forest. Let's just see what we can do. And, if we played them 10 times, we might have beat them twice, maybe, if we, but everything would have had to go on right. So honestly, I think we walked out of that going that we gave it our best. You always feel good. Like when we played Maryland the year before, we definitely didn't feel like we gave it our best. But I'd say in my senior year, we walked away going, we probably got what we could get out of this deal.
I think Clags made the same point you did, saying you needed more than 1 out of the 3 of you to have a good game in that one. And it wasn't just that you had a good game and they didn't. H went 0 for 8 from 3 in that game.
Yeah.
Clags was, like you said, 4 of 18 on the day. You had 22. You had a really good game, and it just makes you wonder. I mean, like, if you have even a normal shooting get day between the three
Right.
of you, that's a different outcome. But and that's exactly what he said too. You were right.
Yeah, and and I remember Jeff Harris had 15 rebounds, at six
Yeah.
foot four against Tim Duncan. I mean, like I said, you kind of at some point you kind of just max out what you got. I think, yeah, if we shot the ball normally, I think we got a chance to win. But again, when you rely so much on the three and you don't have another like legitimate post option, especially against Tim Duncan, that's hard. You got to get really fortunate. And you can, but you know, it's just hard when you live and die with a three all the time, and that's kind of how we lived.
We've talked about him a lot because we talked to him not all that long ago, and you guys played 4 years together at SLU. But what's your relationship with Erwin Claggett like, just ongoing? Do you guys still have a pretty close friendship? Being locals, being such an integral part of the program. Because I know, like when I look at the program, and you talk about, hey, H's jersey might have sold the best. I still think it's you guys being local, being there for 4 years. I always thought Claggett and Highmark when I think about that era.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Clegg and I are like, I mean, even though we're not, we don't, he's doing his thing. It's SLU High, and we're working family. We don't get to connect all that much, but like, there's just like a brotherhood, and it's kind of cliche to say, but there's a kinship there that will always be there because we kind of had the same shared experiences. I mean, going back to when we were 15, I mean, we played AAU together,
Right.
then we played at SLU together, and I remember when people said when we both committed there, they're like, well, one of you is not going to play because they don't need two guards. And we always just kind of figured out, you know what? If we're good enough, we'll play. And we did. And we played together and we shared the ball. And we kiddingly, he'll say, I'd be the all-time leading scorer if I didn't. Did he tell you that? I'd be the all-time leading scorer if I didn't play with Scott.
I don't
That's
think
like
he's. I'll have to go back and listen, but I don't know if he quite framed it that way.
that's one of his favorite lines is like I would be the all-time leading scorer if I didn't have to play with Highmark. But I mean, we kid each other like that. But we I'll text him after a good game that he's coaching, and we connect in the summer. We try to play some golf. He's a great golfer, loves it. So, but yeah, we have a great relationship. We know each other very well. We come from very different world, different backgrounds, but that's the beauty of sports. Like, I mean, he grew up in like Venice, Illinois, very tough environment. Um, Single mother, raised them, beautiful family, but tough environment. And I grew up kind of West County, St. Louis, mom and dad, leave it to Beaver kind of family, and kind of a classic sense, traditional family. And yet basketball brings us together, and we're almost 50 years old and we're still pretty tight.
What was the transition like? Leaving St. Louis University behind. You had your brief pro career. What were your ambitions leaving SLU?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to try playing basketball, but I knew I didn't have like a legitimate future in it. And I would at West Pine Gym, when we would play in the summer, like all these local guys that were playing overseas would come back and play against us and tell us what it was like to play overseas. And um and I thought that would be cool for a minute, but I also didn't want to be like 32 years old and play in Turkey for a decade and then come back and get my career started. I was very anxious to get started on my career, rightly or wrongly. I'd say Clag, H, and I all had opportunities the year we came out to go to like what is the equivalent of the NBA Summer League in Vegas. Like we all got invites to go do that. Um, I don't. It would not have mattered for me. But I do sometimes I wonder for Clag and H, like if they got in the right situation, could they have made a team? I just think they were that good. And there was an NBA lockout the year that we came out, and so there was no window, and so basically everybody had to go overseas because there was no NBA free agency.
Hmm.
So that was a little bit disappointing for all of us, just because we would have liked to have tried it, go to NBA Summer League and just see what happens. But regardless of that, my ambitions were like immediately, like, I did want to try to play basketball. I did that for 6, 8 months, but I really knew I wanted to get started on my business career. And I knew that basketball wasn't my long-term meal ticket. I wasn't good enough to make enough money where it was like, hey, I can play for a decade and save a lot of money. I was good enough to make a living doing it, but I knew that there was an opportunity cost of not getting started on my career. So I did that for about 9 months. I was in Auckland or Perth, Australia, where Kevin Lish played, and then I was in Auckland, New Zealand. And I remember the team I was playing for in Auckland, New Zealand said, "What is?" And I said, "I'm done. I'm going home." And they said, "What would it take to keep you?" And I was making $4,000 a month at the time, which isn't bad, and everything was taken care of, all your living expenses. And I remember I called home, and then I don't remember I don't remember who I talked to, my dad or my mom, and I went back, and they didn't say to do this, but I went back to them. I said, "Well, if you double my salary and you fly my soon to be fiance over here," and I just asked for like all these crazy demands, and they go, "Okay." And I was like, "Seriously?" And they're like, "Yeah, no, it's fine. We'll double your salary." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I literally, like, in 10 seconds, I just said, "You know what? I apologize. I should not have asked you that. My heart's not in it. I need to go home. I shouldn't even countered, because I'm just not in. I need to go home." And I got a ticket and I flew home. And that was it. I was just done. Do I regret that? Sometimes, every once in a while. Every once in a while. I always tell my wife, I'm like, "You could have come over there and we could have like lived, in Australia or New Zealand for a year or two and, seen the world." But I don't know. I was just anxious to get started on my career.
And New Zealand's amazing. I mean, that's that would be hard for me to pass
You're a
up.
better man than I.
I probably was too overzealous at the time, but
Before we get into your career at all, I'm kind of curious about Athletes in Action. You said you spent a little time with them. So when I was a manager at SLU, we would play. It was before you play lower division schools and exhibition games.
right.
You would play these kind of like club teams of former
Yep.
players, and the two that could actually really play, and I know they had several teams, EA Sports All Stars and Athletes in Action. They always had good teams. Everybody else was not good at all,
Yeah.
but yeah, they could put some teams together. I'm curious what the organization was like in your time there.
Honestly, that was one of the most fun things I did. We had a really good team. Like we had guys from USC and Syracuse, and I mean they took kind of like guys that weren't going to play in the NBA, but like weren't going overseas yet. And they would get 10 guys, and we went to Ohio and had 3 weeks of training camp. And then we played 21 games in 24 days, from like November 1st to like, early December or right around there, right around Thanksgiving. And we played every day, and which was super hard, because you feel like you're the Washington Generals. You're like, can we actually win a game? But if we were fresh, we would probably win half our games. I think we won 6 of our 21 games. But I remember one stretch, we played Florida and then Florida State back to back. And then we flew overnight to Cincinnati. No, I'm sorry. We played Indiana, flew to overnight, played Indiana. Then we played Cincinnati, and then played Cincinnati at 8 p.m. And then we played Notre Dame the next morning at 11 a.m. And I remember going through the layup line, getting warmed up for the Notre Dame, and I go, "Coach, I don't think I can do it." I mean, I've never said this in my life, but I don't think I can go. I don't think I can do it. I'm going to give it my best, but it was wild. But we played Kentucky when they won the national championship. I played at Duke, played at North Carolina. I mean, we played everybody.
Like now with social media and everything, like, because Pete, you can speak to this maybe, but I had no idea this was like happening. It's almost like a sweatshop of work. Like, it's like, how many people are getting injured? Like, I can imagine the just absolute outrage that they're running you 21, or whatever. Like, that's insane. How many people got hurt? Like, the attrition numbers had to be out through the roof.
I think by the end we started taking games off. Like we had like 10 guys. And so like, okay, you take tomorrow off and I'll take the next day off. And we just had to rotate. And we just had like ice bags with us all the time. And it wasn't like we were chartering flights. So it was all
Right.
connected. It was brutal. But I'll tell you a funny story on Athletes in Action. Probably the highlight of the whole deal was we were playing at Cincinnati, and they were in our conference. So I played at Cincinnati, plenty of times. And so we're playing them for Athletes in Action, sold out. Oscar Robertson's there. I mean, they were rolling at the time. And we're down 3 and with like 5 seconds to go, and I come off the screen, catch it, shoot it, hit it, get fouled with like 2 seconds to go, tie the game, free throw, make the free throw, ball game. We win at Cincinnati. Athletes in Action, the Washington Generals beat Cincinnati. And so after the game, because Athletes in Action is a ministry of a deal called Campus Crusade for Christ. So one of us had to like speak about our faith. That was the contract. We'll come in and play you. You will pay us, but we get an opportunity to speak to your crowd and just share our faith, our testimony, like 3 minutes. We can either do it at halftime or we can do it after the game. So their deal was they want us to do it after the game. So it happened to be my turn to speak. So I hit the shot, hit the free throw, we win the game. And they literally like 10 seconds later, they give me the mic. And I'm like, hey, everybody, my name's Scott Highmark. And they're like booing. They're like, you suck, Highmark. You suck. We hated you last year. We hate you now. And like, I'm trying to share my faith and I'm getting like ridiculed by the fans. It was classic. It was so classic.
And I'd like to thank Jesus for allowing me to hit this shot.
Yeah. Yeah. And Spoon and Huggins were best friends.
Yeah.
We didn't know that. So Spoon calls me that night. It's like, hey, I heard what you did to my boy tonight. He's like, he didn't appreciate that.
I take it Huggins
Huggins
didn't stay around to hear you talk, huh?
No, but then after the game, because I was friends with some of the Cincinnati players, I was in the Cincinnati locker room, and Huggins walks in and looks at me like, what are you doing in our locker room? He's like, get out of here.
Did you ask him, what were you doing in our team breakfast?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. The Spoon Huggins relationship might be one of my favorite kind of running threads of every interview I've done. It's such a weird, wonderful relationship, and it's just funny to me.
Yeah, if somebody could figure it out, let me know. But it was legit. I mean, every time I was with Spoon, every time he was on the phone with Huggins, every time.
Oh, that's great. So how do you transition from basketball into the business world? I mean, kind of hearing you, 2-time academic All-American, you talk about how you'd have the business side of the NIL figured out, and how you were kind of itching to get back from, Australia and New Zealand to start your career. It seems like you were pretty ambitious. Did you have things lined up for yourself after basketball?
A little bit. I thought I was going to go work at Anheuser-Busch because I did an internship in college, but for whatever reason didn't work out. But when somebody introduced me to kind of what is now financial services wealth management, as I was trying to play basketball for Athletes in Action and go to New Zealand and Australia. And this person named John Brooks said, hey, I run a financial planning business and I'd love to mentor you and show you what I do. And so I was like, all right, I'll listen. And it's kind of like there's a finance aspect of it. There's some kind of coaching and counseling aspect of it. And I thought it was interesting enough, but I was like, hey, I was just honest. And I said, I'm going to try to play basketball a little bit after school. And he said, no problem. I'll sponsor you to take all your securities exams, because when you're traveling the world, you're going to have lots of downtime. So why don't you use that downtime and study for these exams that you're going to end up taking? Even if you don't want to be in the business, you'll still have that under your belt. So I did, and it worked out great because I got to get a taste of what that business was, the wealth management, financial services, and I got a head start while I was traveling. And then so when I came back in March of 96, I had a sense for what I wanted to do. And I had a head start because I've already been through the securities exams. And at the time, I ended up working at AG Edwards. So I decided that's the business I want to get in. At the time, AG Edwards, before they were bought by Wachovia, Wells Fargo, they were like the biggest brokerage firm in the country, not headquartered in New York. So I was like, well, if I'm going to start in this business and I need to learn, I probably should work for, the biggest brokerage firm outside of New York City. And fortunately, again, very, very fortunate. I kind of grew up going to church with the Edwards family of A.G. Edwards. And so they gave me a chance and kind of put me in their training program, and off we went. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just knew that I didn't want to, for me, I didn't want to go play, make enough money to pay my bills, and then come back when I'm 32. And Clag and I used to talk about this, and I would say, Clag, when you come back, when you're done playing, nobody's going to care that you scored 2,000 points at SLU, and nobody's going to care that you played in Bulgaria. Nobody's going to care. And I mean, they'll like, that's neat. That's like a nice icebreaker. But at some point, you're going to have to add value to somebody's organization.
Mm.
And if you're going to be a coach, that's different. But if you're going to be in business or something else, like my clients today, they think it's fine that I played basketball, but they don't care. Yeah, I've got to produce results. I've got to add value to their life, or they're going to take their business elsewhere. So I just knew that I wanted to get the ball rolling so that, in 10 years that I could actually move meaningfully down the progress of a career. And I'm very fortunate. I've been super blessed and very grateful for a lot of mentors and people that shaped my career. But to say I was anxious to get going was probably an understatement.
Thank you for the PTSD. Now I'm thinking about the Series 7.
Yeah,
Um,
there you go.
Now, I'm curious. You get to watch so much basketball doing color commentary. How do you think you'd fare in the game today? Do you think you'd be better off or worse off?
Playing,
Yeah.
definitely worse. Definitely worse. It was funny. You guys, Troy Robertson,
Yeah.
and you probably know of his brother Ryan, who played at Kansas.
Heard of them.
And Ryan was at the Auburn game, and Ryan and I see each other a lot because we have kids at the same school and we're friends. And Ryan's like, it goes up to me and goes, man, he's like, I don't know if I could actually play in that game, like in my prime, not now, like in my prime. Like it is so fast, it is so physical, it's so athletic. It's not a skill thing, it's just a pure athleticism deal. And I go see guy. I saw a high school game last night. Westminster played CBC.
Mm.
Two great games. And CBC's got both teams have some incredible talent. And I'm asking about this kid and this kid. And I'm like, hey, is SLU recruiting this kid? And, the answer was, kind of, they're not sure. And I'm like, golly, these kids are really, really good high school players. But to play even at a level of SLU, like the bar is just so high. So I don't know how to answer that. Maybe I'm just seeing it as I get old and I can't see myself in it. But I just feel like the court's smaller, the bodies are bigger, the athleticism's so great. I If you said, am I better or worse, I think I'd be worse, to answer you straightly.
You know, you've got a daughter who's getting ready to go play Division I basketball, and unfortunately, is sorry that she's missing out on this season because of her ACL. But how's she holding up? Do you guys feel like she's going to be ready for Belmont next season?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, she's doing well. She's about 6 months post surgery, and so she's starting to get on the court. And like my honestly, like one of my favorite things in the world to do now is go rebound for her.
Hmm.
And I just love like going and rebounding and just sitting there and just being quiet and just feeding her balls. Like, and so we can do that again because she's back doing that now. She can't cut or do some things quite yet, but she should be good to go. I think they say she'll be on the court non-contact in March, where she can move and cut and jump, and then she's going to have to be. The plan is that she'll be at Belmont in June, ready to go. So thank you for asking, and yeah, it's been fun to watch, and it's funny to watch your kid, and you guys may have the opportunity to do this sometime, and watch your kid play the sport that you know and love, but play it so differently than you played it. Like it's hard. It's like she's like a shifty point guard, like with like great handles, and she can shoot it, but like she's a great defender. And it's just funny because it's like she's everything I was not. How
Yeah.
did this happen? So anyway, it's super fun,
Did
and she's excited.
did she look at SLU at all?
Yeah, yeah, she did, and Lisa Stone and her staff was really good, and it was just a matter of she wants to get out of town. She wanted to do her own thing, chart her own course, and
Yeah.
Nashville's kind of a cool place too, and Belmont's a nice place. But yeah, Lisa and her staff were really good, and yeah, she had a lot of good options, and she feels like that's the right level and the right school for her. And yeah, we're excited for her.
I think people forget that when you have these St. Louis kids, and you want Travis to get everybody out of St. Louis, but some people just want to leave town, and
Yeah,
I think when you're asking the question, is Travis dominating St. Louis? And then you bring up, a guy like EJ Liddell or, one of the other guys that went out of town. Sometimes they just don't want to stay. It could, you could have Coach K could take the job at SLU tomorrow and you'd still lose St. Louis kids.
yeah, yeah. Caleb Love. I mean, yeah, we could go down the list, right? And I think that's true. And like again, my daughter's not in that category, but like she wanted to do something different. She wanted to do
Mhm.
something different than dad, and she wanted to get out of town. And there was no sales job that was going to overtake that. So I think you need to get your fair share of kids, and you need to make it. I think you want to make it a hard decision
Mm-hmm.
and make it like, huh? Because I mean, to be honest, you guys know that like all those players that we're talking about, they're pros, right? Those kids are all pros, and so you want those kids to go, I can do everything that I want to do and do it here and still accomplish my personal goals. That's what you want. And then if they decide, hey, I'm going to go to North Carolina, I mean, what are you going to do? But you don't want staying at home to be a limiting factor for their personal success. You want them to go, gosh, I mean, Jason Tatum, I mean, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, right? My argument would be Jason Tatum was going to be a Hall of Famer whether he went to SLU or Duke. Honestly, it didn't matter. He's that good. He could have come here. He could go to Duke. He could go to Siena. It was going to work out wherever he goes. And I do think that's a little bit different now. I think the world is open, and I think you are seeing kids choose different angles because you can kind of get there from anywhere. You don't have to go to one of the five blue bloods to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, they'll find you. I think John Morant is a perfect example right now, maybe the most dynamic player in the league, and he's
Yeah.
coming out of Murray State, and
Yep.
that's the only school that offered him out of high school.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, there's a lot of ways to get there.
Yep.
So question for you: you're third all time in threes made at SLU. Do you think Gibson Jemmerson will make more than you when all's said and done? He's about halfway there.
For sure. For sure. I mean, what is he? He's got like 5 more years to play too, doesn't he, or something like that? Like
He's that third year freshman.
third year freshman. I mean, of course he is. He's gonna if he stays, he's gonna break probably Claggett's all of our records. I think. Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, I'm super pleased with his development. I know you guys are too, and Travis is too. I mean, again, I'm not taking any credit for that, but I remember when because Travis has been talking to him about this long before I did, but I remember talking to him at the announcement of the O'Loughlin Champion Center,
Mhm.
and he was there, and I just pulled him to the side, and I go, "Listen, man," I said, "you have so much upside." I said, can I just give you one piece of advice? Find a way to get to the free throw line this year. I don't care what it takes. Jump into guys, flop into them. I don't care. You shot 12 free throws last year, 12 the whole year.
Yeah.
You've got to find a way to get to the line. And man, I mean, not only has he figured that out, he's got a mid-range game. He's super aggressive. He's defending better. I mean, he's taken it way beyond what I thought he could, but he it's really he's just completely overhauled his game. I mean, he could be a player of the year candidate this year, if not next.
He's leading the league in scoring.
I
And
know.
yeah, I mean, I would actually argue that he needs to do more even from now to get to the free throw line, because if he could just kind of sell fouls a little bit more.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
games where his jersey's getting tugged like
Yeah.
every time he cuts through the lane. If he kind of learns that, not to mention maybe a year or two more of name recognition where refs give him a little more of the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt.
That's exactly a great
Yeah.
point, because now refs are going to know who he is,
Right.
and they're going to be watching that off the ball stuff. Whereas if you're just a guy, they're not really watching that. But if you're the leading scorer in the league, they're going to be watching that. I think that's a
Oh,
great point.
he could shoot 8 or 10 free throws a game if he really wanted to. You know, and if those other things kind of go right for him.
Yep.
But yeah. What do you got, Zach? It looks like you're doing a little research over there.
No, I was looking over the ASU 93-94. Yeah, I'm still stuck on that. It's my ADHD. No, yeah, apparently there's only like 4 games, and I'm looking at that score, and it was a 2-point Billiken win, and I remember watching the documentary, and I want to say they only picked games that were going to be like blowouts for ASU, and that way they could still win and you know, shave them points. There, I probably shouldn't even bring it up, but there, you know, there were times when you'd watch a Billiken game in the previous era where you're just like, man, are we really that bad, or is there something going on here? But no, Scott, I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time, man. And to say that you're not the mayor of St. Louis, I think you might be able to get a few votes in there. I know I'd put in a vote, maybe. I think I'd have to see the platform, but I could get on board.
Well, I appreciate that. It's super fun to grow up here, play here, live here, go to games, bring my family. I mean, I'm Billiken through and through, and it's good to be with you guys. And thanks for what you do. Thanks for promoting the program and bringing these stories back to life, and that builds culture for the whole program and gets people like the new generation to hear the stories about the older generation, and it just builds on it. I know you guys love it, so I appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah, I think selfishly, I just like to meet you guys and the guys the guys I watched growing up. So it's definitely there's a selfish endeavor part for me too. So I appreciate you sharing your stories with us, man. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, thanks a lot, Scott. This has been great.
Yeah, appreciate you guys doing your homework and making it a lot of fun. So thank you.
See you soon at Shafit, Scott.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.
All right.